Hola y bienvenidos a LatinoED Talks con Amanda Fernandez. My name is Migdalia Diaz, Chief Operating Officer at Latinos for Education. We're thrilled to have you join us today for what promises to be a compelling and insightful conversation. If you're new to our work, Latinos for Education is the first Latino-founded and led national organization dedicated to developing, placing, and connecting Latino leadership in education. We aim to uplift Latino voices and advance policies and practices that open doors to equitable education for all students. LatinoED Talks is our series of live-streamed conversations with leading Latino figures that dive into the heart of education issues impacting our community. We are pleased to have with us, as always, our host, Amanda Fernandez, the founder and CEO of Latinos for Education. Amanda has devoted her career to increasing Latino representation in education, working tirelessly to expand opportunities for Latino students and educators. Under her vision, Latinos for Education has evolved from a Boston-based organization to a national movement driving real change in the education sector. She previously served on the Massachusetts Governor's Latino Empowerment Council and is a trustee of the board with the Massachusetts Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. She is a 2020 recipient of the McNulty Prize Catalyst Fund and a senior fellow at Future Ed. Joining Amanda today is Adrián Ridner, co-founder and CEO of Study.com. Adrián is a transformative leader in the field of education technology. Through Study.com, he has worked to make education more accessible and equitable, helping countless students and educators. Today's conversation, Driving Equity Through EdTech, Latino Leadership, and the Future of Education, will explore the critical role that Latino leadership plays in the EdTech sector and how technology can help address longstanding educational inequities. Amanda and Adrián will discuss a transformative potential of EdTech in K-12 education and how Latino voices are crucial in shaping its future. We encourage you to engage with us during the session by sharing your questions and comments in the chat. We'll have a dedicated Q&A segment, so your thoughts and perspectives are welcomed and encouraged. Thank you again for tuning in, and without further ado, please welcome Amanda Fernandez. Amanda, bienvenida.
Gracias, Migdalia. Thank you so much. Buenas tardes a todos. It's so great to have you back with us again for this really important conversation we're about to have with Adrián Ridner, the CEO and co-founder of Study.com. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Adrián and a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and then I'm going to have him join us. So Adrián Ridner is co-founder and CEO of Study.com, an education platform supporting more than 34 million learners and educators a month across K-12 curriculum, college courses, and test prep. As a Latino EdTech founder and first-generation college grad, Adrián has spent the past 2 decades focused on making education accessible for undersupported learners. Adrián is on the board of the Rican Foundation Community Libraries, which has been promoting literacy and access to knowledge in Central America since 2000. He also serves as a board member for Cal Poly State University's Engineering and Computer Science Advisory Council, where he has helped transform the curriculum to prepare graduates for the fast-changing technology careers of today. Adrián also graduated from Cal Poly University with both a master's and bachelor's degree in computer science. Así que es bien inteligente. I'm so excited, and bienvenido to Adrián for joining us.
Muchas gracias, Amanda. Es un honor y un placer. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon.
So great to have you. We've got listeners from coast to coast, so we're excited to have this conversation. I always like to start with a little bit of the personal story of our guests, and so would love to hear your journey. First, if you could say a little bit more, Adrián, about Study.com, the work that you all do at Study.com, and then talk a little bit about your journey. And, I imagine it wasn't too easy as a first gen, and then talk about this journey as a first generation immigrant to founder and CEO of Study.com. Pretty amazing.
Thank you. Yes, I was reflecting on our conversation for today, and I was thinking if I went back to my 17-year-old me, who had no teachers that looked like me, who had no teachers that sounded like me, and told them where I would be and the impact we could have, I wouldn't have believed it. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't understand. I didn't have the role models to get here. So it's really a pleasure to be here and share a little bit of the story. And as you mentioned, Study.com, we're an online learning platform. We're helping over 34 million learners and educators every month. So you think about middle school, high school, college, and beyond in certifications. That's really a big area. So a lot of our users are learners directly, taking advantage to figure out, how to reach that aha moment, how to reach that breakthrough moment, and really open the door to the life-changing impact of education. But also educators are over a quarter to a third of our users, because we empower them to do their best work, and be able to serve their students better and their learning outcomes. So that's a big focus. But as I said, if you would have told my 17-year-old self, I wouldn't have believed it. And before we go further, I want to make sure I shared this with you, Amanda, before. All the credit has to go to mi papá y mi mamá. So I'm going to start with that. They deserve all the credit. They left everything behind in Argentina, moved across 4 countries in less than 10 years when I was little, to give mi hermano Pablo and I an education and a chance for a better future. And for me, that meant moving a lot when I was little. Being a new kid at school is never easy. In my case, I had to learn new languages. We moved from Argentina to Venezuela to Brazil, so it was Portuguese, and then the US finally, that was English. And so moving that many times, learning new languages, it was difficult. But it's actually a story that's very familiar to the 45 million immigrants that are living in the US today. Many who are innovators and have done even bigger things that are probably sitting with us in the audience today. But each time I moved was different, and it formed my perspective. It formed why I started Study.com. From, when I went to Brazil, for example, the first day of school, I had 50 kids that surrounded my desk, even though I worn, an Argentina football jersey, which is not exactly what you're supposed to do in Brazil. But they didn't care. They came, they kept talking. The teachers were embracing me. I didn't speak any Portuguese, but my Portuñol, I got by. And unfortunately, when I got to the US, was very different. And I learned that you can't take inclusion for granted. To give you an example, I had lunch by myself the first 2 weeks I was in high school here. And I had no teachers that even understood what I was going through. There were no teachers. I didn't know any English, so it was hard to connect. But the part that hit me harder was there were very few students, let alone teachers, that looked like me, sounded like me, dressed like me. And again, I'm not alone in that feeling. There's millions of under-supported and underrepresented students feel that way every day. And unfortunately, since the time I was in school, we made some progress, but we still have a lot of work to do. And that's a big part of why I knew there had to be a way that technology could help all types of students and learners. But there's a second part of my journey that I want to share that really crafted why I started not just Study, but some of the other organizations that I'm involved with. And that has to do with mi hermano, Pablo, which I mentioned. Pablo has special needs. And when he was born, the doctor told my parents that Pablo wouldn't be able to walk or talk or do anything, really. Of course, fast forward, those doctors in Argentina were wrong. Pablo speaks English better than I do, Portuguese, competes Special Olympics. And it's not that he couldn't learn. He learned differently. And it's not people with special needs or learning differences. We all learn differently. And what really inspired me was the person who figured this out in our tiny little apartment in La Plata was someone who never graduated from college, never got her teacher license, left actually her career to be able to figure this out and help him, and is actually the most successful teacher I've ever met, mi mamá. She figured out how he needed to learn, and she's a huge inspiration. And I just wanted to carry that forward. And when I finished school, I knew there was a way technology could bring these things together. And that's why I really set on to figure out how to open the door to the life-changing impact of education for everyone, not those just who have means or resources. and especially those underrepresented and undersupported learners. So that's a little bit of my story, but it wasn't easy, and I've gotten a lot of help along the way. But again, all the credit goes to Papa and Mama. I wouldn't be able to do it if it wasn't for their inspiration and their hard work. My dad had multiple jobs. We're in Argentina just to be able to make ends meet, and to be able to have the opportunity to help others and to be helping 34 million others. It's incredible and truly an honor for me.
It is an incredible journey and story, and thank you for sharing such a personal part of your narrative. But as we all know, to have the passion and commitment to start a company from nothing takes that kind of inspiration. It has to come from somewhere, right? And so thank you for that. Clearly, your immigrant story, the drive of your mother, the courage of your family all have been drivers, and the inspiration, of course, of your brother. It just makes it all the more, I think, not only special, but important in terms of the type of work that you decided to engage in to kind of give back and give forward. So thank you for sharing that. Adrián, when we met, let me just say this because I don't think I really talked about it. So I met Adrián less than a year ago at the ASU GSV, the sort of the largest EdTech conference in the world that happens annually. And I had the great honor of getting an Innovator of Color Award. But what was so great was the person who was part of the selection team and who actually introduced me for getting the award was Adrián. And I got to know him a little bit through that experience of getting that award. And he had been a prior awardee. So, boy, what an honor to sort of follow you in that, Adrián, given what you've done. But one thing that we found in common was just this, and you referred to it, you didn't have teachers that could understand you, like literally, but also in sort of the cultural dynamic. And so that mattered, that you didn't have those role models. You didn't have sort of that specific kind of engagement opportunity with educators in the schools that you were at. And so I want to talk a little bit about sort of that shared sort of commitment that we have and discussion around why it's important to have educator diversity, why we need more of our educators that reflect the backgrounds and students of our students. So just a few statistics, which won't be new to you, but maybe to some of our listeners. Latino students are the fastest growing demographic in U.S. schools and represent 29% of pre-K through 12 students in the U.S. Yet just 9% of our teachers in U.S. public schools are Latino, and unfortunately, even fewer are in principal or other sort of senior or administrator roles in the K through 12 system. So what ends up happening is that the vast majority of Latino students never have the opportunity to have an educator or an adult in the building that shares their background and experiences. So let's talk about a little bit more about why that matters. Say a little bit more about that and how that led you at study.com to kind of have this commitment to social impact and educational equity.
Absolutely. And before I get to that, by the way, congratulations on your Innovator of Color Award. I do want to mention, in case the listeners don't know this, it's actually a very competitive process. That committee is one of the most enjoyable thing I get to do, because I get to see all the applications with the rest of the committee. And it was quite a few of them that have done a spectacular job and work. But Amanda and the work Latinos for Education have done has truly been one of a kind and very, very well deserved. So I just wanted to mention that in case people were not familiar with that award. But it's important, and the reason it's important is simple. How to solve for it and make it better is extremely complex and difficult. But all the research and data shows it. Teachers and school leaderships are a significant predictor on student outcomes and achievement. Full stop. Right. So that is how it works. And there's more layers than that. I mentioned, as I said earlier, it's not just a personal piece, but is a system-wide thing. You have to be able to see and have those role models. To quote a smarter person, you can't be it if you can't see it, right? And I think that from our perspective, all the data shows that the level of student engagement, and not just academic achievement, social emotional learning and development, the sense of belonging and inclusion, all looking at a whole student, make a huge difference depending on not just the teacher, but the leadership. And then at the leadership level, the policies and the understanding of what those students need and what the community needs. It's also very strong correlations with diversity, and really representation for the area. So it matters for all those reasons. However, the hard question is, how do we make it better? Those statistics that you shared are heartbreaking. They're heartbreaking. And it's true for Latinos, it's true for students, brown and Black students of colors and educators of color in general. Similar statistics. And how do we make that better? How do we move the number of teachers, the percent of teachers, and the leaders in the districts? And that's hard. And like I said, for us, that's personal. One of the things we realized as I've been doing the work with study over the last 7 or 8 years and grew the company is there's only so much you can do by yourself, even with a company and with resources at scale. The real way to affect structural change is bringing people together with a shared vision and different groups. And that's why we started Keys to the Classroom, which is our impact initiative to bring together nonprofit, governments, schools, districts, and companies that are really aligned with this work to make a difference. And the goal of that initiative is to help diversify and strengthen the teacher pipeline and support teachers and students of color, recognizing how underrepresented they are, and mainly, understanding that the research says it's not just a shortage of teachers overall, which we all know is there, but in particular teachers of color. So we were looking to address that. And from my perspective, when you think about the white students are no longer the majority at 44% of public school students, but the teacher workforce is 78% white. That's also another very drastic statistic. And those were things that we were trying to address. Like I said, not just the shortage, but the diversity in the pipeline. And we've done a lot of work. Some of it is research work through the initiative. We've actually donated over 4 million in kind of our test preparation resources and platform to help the most disadvantaged teachers be able to not just prepare for the teacher certification exams, but also pass them ideally the first time. And I'm very proud of the work we've done there. We have over a 92% pass rate, and we just finished a study that with our intervention for teacher candidates of color that we've done with Teach.org led to an 8% increase in pass rates overall. And again, when you think about 50% of all teacher candidates failed the licensing exam on the first attempt, and only 57% of Hispanic teacher candidates pass even after multiple attempts, compared to 75% of white candidates who ultimately pass, there's a big discrepancy. And that's what Keys to the Classroom is trying to address. We can't do it alone. It's about bringing all those constituencies together to be able to make a difference. And we're very, very committed to that impact.
Yeah, I honestly, after I met you and we talked a little bit and you told me about this initiative, I was floored. I honestly thought, wait, this exists? I mean, the fact that you have the wherewithal, that you knew about this challenge, obviously through your own experience, but look, we don't find people like you that often, and companies like yours that often, that really have this specific and laser focus, and have, through your social responsibility work, your ability to say, we're going to make a statement on this because it matters, and it matters to our students. So that just was honestly surprising to me. I don't run into it that often. And so I just give you all so much credit for so much of the work that you've done, and to focus on the certifications. because we know, as you just stated in the statistics, it's a massive barrier for Latinos and other prospective teachers of color to pass that exam. And it's not because they're not capable. There's other barriers that get in the way. And you all, financial barriers is a big one. And so what you all are alleviating is that. And then the adequate preparation, right, that they need for their exam. So hats off, because you're removing a massive barrier.
Thank you. And you mentioned something just now that I want to touch on too. It's
Yes.
not just the cost, right? But back to what I said earlier, you have to individualize the learning, and that applies to licensing exams, certifications, or to a student in a K-12 classroom. And the fact that everyone learns differently, someone who English is their second language may need a little different test preparation, is how we close some of this gap. And it's part of, I like to say, our product is our impact. Even though we have all these other initiatives and we donate, the actual impact is the results and the outcomes that people achieve when they use the platform. But the reason it works is because we're looking about how do we individualize it? How do we understand where that learner is coming from? And if you're trying to get certified as a teacher, or if you're a high school student or a middle schooler, there are things that need to be individualized to you that are really important and is going to really impact the outcome. So the barrier, yes, the access and the cost is one, but there's a lot of other ones to make this work that was important for us to really be, as you said, laser focused on, and then bring constituencies together who are trying to solve this problem at scale to be able to really move the needle, because it's a hard needle to move, and we all know that it matters, but it's hard to really move not just the number of teachers and the shortage, but the diversity in the pipeline, as you very well know for the work you all do at Latinos for Education, which is also incredible. And again, with the resources that you have, the attention and focus that you put on helping this issue and helping the workforce. It's a workforce issue as much as it is a teacher shortage and diversity issue. And I think it's really important to bring all the organizations together.
I completely agree. So again, we know it takes sustained effort. So it's just really great to know that you all are out there doing this kind of work and you're committed to it. So let's talk a little bit more about sort of other aspects of the educator pipeline and some of the products and services that you provide that support our educators. You talked obviously about the certification exams. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the other resources that you all offer to support existing teachers to stay in the classroom, to advance their skill sets, and in particular in hard to hire areas, which there are a few, which we know there are critical shortages of educators? I'd love for you to speak to that.
Yes, and I think there's several ways we support teachers. So on that last one, on hard to hire areas, so that also overlaps quite a bit with a lot of times where there's a number of teachers on temporary or conditional licenses that obviously escalated during the pandemic to address teacher shortages in hard to hire locations or hard to hire specialties. And that's an area that we also focus on quite a bit to be able to turn those into permanent licensing. And we did a recent program we conducted that found the use of our material increased the pass rates for some of those specialty areas by as much as 12% among retakers of the exam. And I think that's a really important area to focus on, because having someone who is already almost there is a great way, and then getting them through the finish line, especially for some of those hard, again, it's not just the specialties, but some locations are harder than others to really fill the teacher pipeline and diversify it. It's a really good way to do it because they're almost there. We just need to help that last mile. So that's an important way we help. But then when you step back, we also look at, what about the educator pathway? What about getting more people interested in becoming a teacher? And that a lot of times goes through your bachelor's degree and your formal 4-year education or beyond. And that's where we have actually our Keys to College initiative, which is based on our College Saver program, which works similar to community college from your phone. You can earn credits towards a college degree with our online courses. They transfer to about 1,500 U.S. Colleges and universities, public, private. And it's really incredible because when we first looked at that, we realized the cost, again, was a barrier, but also the flexibility, the ability to take the courses and earn the credits when you need it. A lot of people, and a lot of them that want to become teachers, have started maybe college 10, 15 years ago, but something happened, life got in the way, and now they're doing a different job. They're working in retail, they're doing something else. They still aspire to become a teacher, but they can't, and they don't know how to bridge that. And that's what we do with the College Saver program. It's not just about taking our courses, it's about making sure they get full credit for those things they already earn, and be able to then transfer to a four-year institution and get that degree, ideally with no debt, or very little debt. And it's amazing because, again, through the Keys to College program, our goal when we first launched College Saver was to help save $1 billion in tuition savings, and that was very, very lofty at the time. But I'm happy to report, I just got the math actually last week. We're up to $475 million in saved tuition costs for transfer students, and that's because, again, we're focused on scalable impact, and the educator pathway is a big part of that. And of course, there's other degrees and other pathways that are there, but the educator one is one that we're singularly focused on as well. And the third way we help teachers is once they're in the classroom. Our products and our curriculum and our platform absolutely helps make their jobs easier, and not just easier. We know all the teachers are overworked. I think the last stats I saw was over 53 hours a week. The average teacher is working, and we actually ran a survey recently that Latino teachers report a greater amount of administrative work compared to the general population. And one of the things we strive to do with study.com when you're an educator is help you bring down that time and raise the efficacy and enable you to just be the best teacher you can be, and spend the time in the way you want to in the classroom. So those are the different ways that we help using the platform, both on becoming a teacher and then becoming a successful teacher and a sustainable educator, because retention, as you very well know, is another big challenge we have in the not just Latino teachers, but teachers overall. And we strive to really connect those dots the best we can, and be as helpful as we can in that journey.
It's so interesting to me how we basically, through this program, you're doing the same work that we are, just in different ways, right? We're tackling the challenges in slightly different ways, but you hit the mark, right? These conditional license or provisional license that we experienced so much over the pandemic, right? We had so many educators. And one thing I found really interesting, because I was on the state board at the time, was that what we were hearing from superintendents was these educators are, so many of them are qualified and ready to go. We just got to get them to the finish line. And so you're addressing that. And it was sort of a simple thing to be able to close, but clearly this is where a company like yours can come in to help address that challenge at a faster rate than probably an agency might be able to do. So that to me just really stands out. Clearly you're addressing removing financial barriers, which are huge. And then when you're talking about supporting folks who have left their higher education, we're usually talking about people of color and Latinos all the time, right? Have so many obligations. Community college does not always transfer to going to a four-year university. So you're really hitting it on all the points in terms of removing those obstacles. It's really amazing.
And I think, thank you. And speaking to the work you mentioned, we're addressing it in different ways, and I agree. And that's why I realized, and as I really looked at how to make a structural level, system level impact, bringing different organizations, nonprofits, government organizations, schools, districts was critical, because the real solution is all these different approaches brought together to try to help solve the challenges we have together. Individually, we can't really solve, but together we can really move the needle. And there's different levels of needs and challenges that each of our approaches, are complementary. But having that shared goal and shared vision is the thing that really helps move the needle. And I've loved finding organizations that are really aligned with us at that fundamental mission level. And if they're nonprofits, governments or educational or companies, it's been one of the biggest drivers of the scale of our impact that I've seen over the last couple of years was, growing that network and linking all those organizations together, similar to the work that we've been talking about, that I think it can make a huge difference.
Clearly, and it's a big deal to identify that, because that's not usually in most systems the approach, right? So you've identified a way to sort of break down silos and say we need multi-sector collaboration to actually address these challenges. So again, I think it's something that you've taken a leadership role in with study.com, and I certainly would like to see more of it happening, because I agree with you. It's essential across many different issues in education that we have that kind of multi-sector investment and engagement. So I love that. But you know what? I want to talk about AI, because I'm telling you, we're on the AI journey at Latinos for Education. I'm sure a lot of listeners, if they're in nonprofits and other spaces that aren't EdTech, are saying, okay, how do we go about understanding the rapid pace at which AI is proliferating the education system and sector? Can you talk about how you all are working on and thinking about advances in AI and the emerging technologies that you want to offer to the sector?
Yes, and I'm surprised we managed to go 32 minutes before bringing up AI. I think it's in every conversation
I know.
I have
Start.
today for good reason. It's absolutely one of the biggest advancements, and I'm a big fan of the Bill Gates quote, where we're overestimating what we can do in 2 years, but we're underestimating what we're going to do in 10. And I think that applies to AI 100%. And I think if you put all the hype aside, the reality is it is a transformational technology, and as it relates to access, as it relates to the ability to individualize learning, is huge. So I'll get to that in a minute, but I actually want to start with the way that we're using it at the RECAN Foundation, because you mentioned nonprofits, Latinos for Education. And it's a simple thing and it's not complicated, but I was talking to the CEO there, and he was going through the number of grants. They work with ASHA and other government organizations to get grants and funding for new libraries, but also getting new books, getting technology into the libraries, different organizations around the world. And the amount of time they were spending writing the grants, the level of complexity of the documents, the amount of things, but also how many they had done, tens of them successful, probably many more tens that were not, but they had all these sitting on their desktop, and they still were writing, the new ones coming out for, this year. And, I jumped on a call with them and for about an hour and said, okay, show me all of the ones that you've done. Show me the ones that were successful and the document for the new grant. And in a matter of an hour, I showed them, they still had to do work, but it transformed a weeks-long process into an hours-long process to be able to fill the grant applications and to apply to a lot more grants as a nonprofit, which is a big determination of how much funding you're going to be able to have from those sources, by using essentially ChatGPT without any other automation, without any developers. It was on their own from their desktop. And I bring that example because I think it's applicable. Any nonprofit, and study.com as an organization, we're using it every day to drive efficiency in our work. It's the first time where you can break the iron triangle, as they call it, right? You can have it fast, cheap, or good, but pick two. AI is the first time that you can actually pick all three if you use it properly and you learn how to use it. And for us internally, we're doing that and trying to advance that across all of the teams and departments so we can have a bigger impact as a company. But of course, as a recovering software engineer, the more interesting part for me is how we embed it in the platform.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what study.com has been doing. And there's two main ways that we're thinking about AI on study.com. One is what you would consider, native AI, where the experience is being driven. You'll see an assistant. It could be a teaching assistant. It could be a student assistant. They'll be chatting. It will help, create some content dynamically for you, and really drive some of that experience in a way that it would be pretty obvious to the user. And that's interesting, and it's driving a lot of engagement. You get a problem wrong, you can jump in and say, oh, here's, you thought it was that answer. Here's why it's not that answer. I understand why you were confused, but this is the right answer. Here's 3 more problems to try. And that's amazing, and it's something that it, as a simple example, works really well. But the part that I'm even more excited about is what I like to call invisible AI. So the invisible AI is that learner actually has no idea behind the scenes. We're using machine learning and generative AI and layering the technologies to make their outcomes better and their experience better. But it's happening even though they don't know it. So an example in test prep that I like to talk about is, for example, adaptive learning has been around for a long time. And if I like to simplify adaptive learning, is a student knows some things, doesn't know another, and they're going through a maze. And part of your job is to figure out, okay, you got to take a right turn, a left turn. How do I help that student? By practicing instruction assessment, figure out how to get to their goal, to get that certification, to get the target score. And before, you could do it in a way that if you had enough data, you could pre-construct a lot of the pathways that 70% of the students took. And that was great. If you had enough resources and scale and data, you could do that, and the learning could be adapted. Okay. Here's the change today and how invisible AI works today. You can actually serve 100% of the students, because even that other 30%, they get stuck on things that are not as common. They have to take 2 left turns in a row, and most people don't. But for them, that's critical to be successful in their learning outcomes. The maze can be created dynamically with generative AI. Those pathways can actually change as you go, and not have to be all pre-created and pre-constructed educational materials and content. And that is invisible to the user and invisible to the learner, extremely powerful to the learning outcomes. So again, there's ways that are very, very obvious and tangible, where AI is native on the platform, and there's invisible AI, and the combination of both is driving not just engagement, but a level of outcomes. And that doesn't matter if you're trying to study for a college course, pass the praxis of the FTC or the Texas certification, or you're just a middle school or high school student trying to learn algebra or calculus or social studies. So we've integrated AI in a lot of different ways across the organization and the platform. And the key is really, it's the first time where you can make learning simple, but also individualized and personalized. And that's extremely important when you look at, again, students and educators of color.
I mean, I'm just fascinated. We need 2 more hours to talk about this invisible AI and the personalized nature. I just think it's well, as you said, AI is a transformational technology, and I think we've kind of all known that. But when it comes from someone like you who's doing this every day, we have to take this to heart. This is happening. And we all have to adapt. I believe that. And so we're starting to think about, again, how do we support educators, and in particular, Latino educators? So I'd love to hear sort of how you're thinking about your reach with these products, and how are we going to get these in the hands of our educators of color in particular, who usually are in lower resourced school districts, lower access to professional development to be able to learn how to use the tools, et cetera. I would love to know how you all are thinking about the reach and getting and thinking about the partnerships you need in order to make sure that these are getting in the hands of the educators who need to serve the students that really need these supports more than anyone.
Yes, and we spent a lot of time thinking about the reach. One thing before I get to that on the educators, because I didn't mention it, the AI for teachers, right? It's such a critical tool to enable them, as we were saying earlier, to go from that 53-plus-hour work week to a reasonable work week, but also spend more time in the things that they got into teaching for and that can make the biggest impact in the classroom. And for us, what we built with our learn and curriculum solutions for teachers, we're helping them. There's a teaching assistant on the side. We already have the most expert created curriculum by teachers, by professors, by professional instructional designers. But now we're layering AI on top to help save them time. So imagine not just everything state aligners align, but also things like lesson plans. They could actually paste in the lesson plan or objectives and get everything that they need on study.com that aligns to it, including instructional videos, including practice, and then kick off the assignments and the active learning journey for their students, all from one user experience powered by AI. So the ability to use AI to enable educators is just as transformational. And retention, not just efficacy in the classroom and outcomes that are important for students are impacted, but the retention of those teachers that are able to truly master and have a simple way to use AI or a platform like Study in their classroom, I believe is one of the things that is most likely to move the needle, because you can lower some of that load and increase some of the joy that comes from being in the classroom. But to your point about reach, we can't have this be something that only goes to the districts with the most resources or the teachers who can afford to pay it on their own. And reaching Latino educators is a big focus for us. I think partnerships like ours play a key role in reaching Latino teachers and teachers of colors, more broadly, especially in historically underrepresented communities. Our Keys to Classroom initiative, another way to really look at how to get a broader audience. One of the things we didn't talk about is when we expand those partnerships, we get media coverage. When we get that media coverage for something like Keys to the Classroom, that actually, a lot of it is awareness. Some of it is resources, but some of it is understanding about the challenge in the first place, and that there are solutions that are accessible that can help. So raising the awareness of those things that are available is a big part of how we do it. And then partnering with other organizations, not just like Latino Education, but Teach.org, Teach for America. We're the official provider for Teach for America for all their teacher test prep. We're actually ETS, the maker of Praxis, the official test prep provider. But what we do is we with every single one of those partnerships, part of what we build is casting a wider net to make sure that we're able to amplify the message and reach more educators of color and Latinos. And the last thing is putting a lot of effort in very specific districts. So we have close and large relationships with Clark County, Nevada, San Bernardino School District, the Dallas Independent School District, with our majority Latino populations. And that's a big focus for us to make sure that it gets in the hands of as many, not just Latino educators, but Latino students as possible.
Yes. Can you talk a little bit more about that, Adrián, and the more under-resourced districts that you're working in? Again, you've just talked about all the tremendous uses that EdTech and AI can bring into the classrooms to help with efficiencies, et cetera, on the educator side. Can you talk a little bit about just the digital divide and just the fact that we've got a lot of students who don't have access to technology in their homes, and so when you're bringing AI into a school district, EdTech solutions, how do you all think about the sort of gaps that could be exacerbated because students themselves don't have the access to the technology that they need, as basic as a computer, right? We saw this during the pandemic. So many of our students did not have a computer, could not access their education. So I would love for you to speak to the student side of this and how you all think about it.
That's a really important question on exactly where you're coming from. And My fundamental belief is technology and education technology can be a bridge to help all learners, especially Latino students, reach their goals, their dreams, and their aspirations. But the digital divide is extremely real. And I think the point you're highlighting is critical. We can't make the gap worse. We got to close it. We got to bridge it. And I have, there's some very specific work we're doing here. You mentioned devices, and that's a big one. Numerous studies shows that students favor actually and have significantly more access to mobile devices, particularly smartphones,
Yes.
over laptops.
Yes.
And even low-income students and families. So among the Latino community, reliance on mobile device is even higher due to the limited access of home computers at home, and even private spaces to have a home computer at home. Only 57% of Hispanic adults own a desktop computer or a laptop computer, compared to 82% of their white counterparts. So we have to have solutions that are mobile first, and that's a big part of our focus at study.com. If it's through the site or if it's through the app, we make sure that everything we do serves them. Not that if you don't have a laptop or a tablet, you can't take advantage of the larger screen. And it's not just the educational content. You have to be able to make sure the assignments and the projects and the practice, all of it works. And I think that's really important. I will say it's also important, and we saw some during COVID, and unfortunately, some of that funding and eagerness to make it happen has gone down some.
Yeah.
But it's also, I believe, critical for school districts to ensure all students have access to technology, if it is a personal device or a device from the school, and if not a device they can take one-to-one themselves, really enough resources on campus that they can come in and use to take advantage. And it's not just of AI, but of all the benefits of using technology in the learning journey, especially once you get to middle school, high school, and beyond. So I think that's really critical. The other thing we often forget is broadband. We take it for granted that internet speeds. That's also a big issue, which is why having both at-home ability, which the mobile devices often bring, but also at school and flexibility on the timing and hours to take advantage of the resources is critical to enable, again, Latino, but other underrepresented populations to not make the gap worse. And this is a big issue because I'm really concerned in a lot of the conversations I've had that we're going to spend as long as we took debating if coding needed to become a primary curriculum subject and a secondary curriculum subject, deciding if AI literacy is it's key moving forward. And there is no debate. AI literacy is absolutely something we're going to have to educate all of our children, all of our students in. It's an intricate part of the direction of where the world is going. And if we spend as much time debating if it should be just like coding, that we spend decades debating if that should be a subject or not a subject, what's going to happen is only those with means and resources are going to learn it and are going to go take advantage. And what that's going to do to the digital divide and the gap and the inequality gap is going to explode it exponentially. So to me, AI literacy is a fundamental issue that we have to make sure schools and districts and universities understand we cannot fall behind, or we're going to make it particularly grim for our students of color because they won't have the private resourcing, many of them, to be able to learn it on their own. But what will do to their ability to succeed in the rest of their endeavors down the road and understand how to be more efficient and how to operate in this new world is going to be severely constrained. So we have to make it a central piece of our curriculum and provide the resources needed to make it happen, regardless of where you live or who you are.
Yeah, thank you for that strong perspective. It's really important. We at Latinos for Education have done a lot of advocacy in this area of digital and broadband equity because of everything you just said. We've been very concerned about this divide widening because of the lack of access that our students and families have. So we're all in with you. It's something we've been fighting for from a policy and advocacy perspective, because that's another area where partnership is really necessary, right? So organizations like ours can play that role to help with the voice that needs to be brought to the table, which is the Latino voice, given that we're the largest student population in the country. So to me, it's again kind of this no-brainer of, we say it all the time, when Latinos succeed, we all succeed. And that's very much so in this space of digital and broadband equity, so that all of this AI literacy, access to and understanding of use of technology, that has to be part and parcel to the success of Latinos in America. So I really appreciate that you brought up this really important piece of access, because it worries me, honestly, of the widening gaps if we don't get ahead of it.
And it should. And you mentioned Latinos are the largest, and you know this, but for our listeners too, Latinos are not just the largest; they're actually the only growing populations in the K-12 school districts right now. And so we're continuing, not just the largest now, we're continuing to be even a bigger percent of the overall student population over the next 5 years.
Absolutely. And again, I appreciate you saying it and not me, because I say it all the time. So I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Oh my gosh, the time has gone so quickly. I'm going to give you a minute or two here to share your final thoughts and takeaways. What do you want us to remember, take away from this conversation? And in particular, what would you suggest for some of us who are sort of not early adopters, who need a little bit more support? Because I may be one of those, maybe. What would you suggest in terms of sort of embracing where we're headed with transformational technology that's coming into our world right now?
Yes, I've had a lot of conversations with people, and I think I recognize that not everyone is at the same stage of adoption and even understanding of the technology. But one thing that I encourage everyone to do is think about other things that felt similarly. The first time you got your hands on the smartphone, the first few times you use Google, what did that feel like? What did you do? Now, some of those things now you do every day, 100 times a day. How did you get there? And I think for a lot of people where I've had that conversation, well, I just used it twice, and I just did one quick thing on Google, or I just did this 3 things on my smartphone. And that, I think, is a big part. Take the first picture, send the first text message, like be on the internet and on a call at the same time. You can think back to those things and realize we've learned new things before as individuals. Certainly as a society, we've adapted to new technologies. But the hardest step is the first step. So take the first step, figure out how to do it. The example I gave with the Rican Foundation and those grants is as simple as uploading a couple Word documents and doing it. A prompt sounds scary. It's not. You're just asking, can you complete this document based on the 2 that I just sent you that work? Then review and read what happened and see what you did. But I think getting started, if it's in a classroom, if it's in a nonprofit organization, and getting familiar yourself is going to be one of the best ways to then understand how to use it system-wide and how it can be applicable system-wide. And by the way, that's similar advice that I've had a lot of conversations about how to get more Latino voices involved in the industry and getting into some of these conversations and decisions being made. And a very similar thought I had is, I learned a long time ago, I can't wait to get invited. I had lunch by myself for 2 weeks, and if I kept waiting for other kids to come say hi in the US, I was going to wait another 2 years. So you got to jump in there and invite yourself. And if it's to leadership, if it's to people making decisions about the policies or the technology being used in the school, the district, or the broader ecosystem, you have to jump in as a Latino leader and say, I'm going to lead here, and I'm going to get involved and take matters in your own hands, because that's the only way change ever happens. We sit back and are polite and wait to get invited. That's not going to cut it. And it's too important of issues that we're dealing with in the conversation we had today for anyone in the audience to try to sit back and wait But, AI, to end on that note, is transformational.
Yeah.
And I think that, regardless of where you land on, is it good? Is it bad for students? There's with any technology, there's great ways to utilize it for good, and there's ways to utilize it that are bad or dangerous or don't make sense for any particular audience and population. And we need to focus on how do we use it for good and use it for good at scale. And I think that if we can spend our time coming together to do that and recognize that the version of AI we have today, just like the first phone you use, the first smartphone you use, or the first time you got onto the broadband internet compared to dial-up, it's the worst version of AI you'll ever use. It's only going to get better from here. Just like your smartphone got better, just like the speed of the internet got better. Just recognize that, and getting familiar now will help you do that. And now more than ever, it's just important to recognize our shared values, to support each other, and focus on helping students succeed. I mean, that's really the main thing I want people to remember is you cannot do it alone, no matter how big your organization is, or how much success you've had. You have to join forces with others to really make long-lasting impact and change. So I really encourage everyone to reach out, connect to one another, connect to both of us, and figure out how we can really make a difference together.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time for questions. There are some really good ones. I wonder if you might literally spend 1 minute on one of these questions that I'm looking at, and then I'm going to close us out. There's a question here about the use of AI and its potential to support equity in education in terms of integrating it into teacher prep programs. So do you have thoughts on that real quick?
Sorry, so the question again was how to integrate AI
into in an equitable way into teacher prep programs.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and one thing that you also have to keep in mind is, again, AI may have bias or hallucination. So there's a lot of things that we have to be mindful when we're using AI that we didn't get to today. So again, it is not perfect, and you have to make sure that you're keeping that in mind when we're looking at test preparation programs. We integrated a lot. We're actually working with a lot of the partners we have that actually work on the test to figure out how to remove bias and make better changes using AI, not just for actually the preparation, but the exam itself. But you cannot do it in a vacuum. I think when you're using it for these purposes that are high stakes and really, really important in terms of the outcomes, really drive a big important impact for the student, you have to combine the subject matter expert and the professional piece with the AI and the technology, and that's a big part of how we do it. So you can't integrate it on itself. You have to integrate it and layer in, human subject matter experts and do it together, because you have to cover some of the inaccuracy, you have to cover some of the errors that it can make, account for some of the biases. So at the stage that it is today, there's great ways to be able to integrate it, and we do a lot of it on study.com, but we layer it all with the human expertise to make sure we validate and do it. The combine is extremely powerful for driving outcomes at scale, but you have to be careful as you're doing it on its own.
Thank you. I'm glad there's still some use for us humans in this AI world. It's good to know.
A lot of use. A lot of use.
Adrián, it has been an enormous pleasure to have you on. Super important conversation. I hope to continue this conversation with you because this is so important to everyone in education. But you've really informed us in a lot of ways. I see a lot of comments just talking about, and I think there's just a lot of excitement about the use of AI in education and, of course, EdTech. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you and your time today. Thanks to all of you who joined us today, and have a great night.
Muchas gracias.